We are potentially on the brink of UFO disclosure. Now, I know that when I say that, some of you are going to have a conniption, and some of you that react that way are adamant that nothing's changed in the UFO arena, and we've been down this rodeo before. This, however, is unambiguously, demonstrably false, and so if these folk can't see what's right in front of their eyes, I'm not sure they should be having a conniption over the fact that many that follow this topic think UFO disclosure could be a future development that's not too far away. Of course, it depends how you define disclosure, and we'll get into that a little later. Witness Citizen, a well-read historian on the UFO topic on Twitter, recently beautifully summarized part of what makes what's going on now regarding UFOs unique from the past, and I'll add some of my own details to what he conveyed. He conveyed, when was the last time Congress mandated a DoD UFO study? Or when was the last time NASA instituted a study on how best to collect UAP data? Or when was the last time multiple intelligence folk who actually studied UAP, such as Lou Elizondo, Jay Stratton, Travis S. Taylor, and Jim Lukatsky, went public after leaving their positions? I don't think there's a precedent for that, and I do think we're in new, uncharted waters, and it's exactly because of that that I wrote the article titled, "The Next Few Years Will Determine UFO Truth, the debate between skeptics and UFO believers on the government's knowledge of UFOs will end with facts." Now, I will say that the disclosure process could implode. I do not deny that. And if it does that, I guess that's the disclosure we'll end up getting. That what we thought about UFOs was simply just not accurate. Chris Mellon, in my view, makes this very argument in the following citation from the Roswell Daily Record from the article titled, "Renewed Calls for UAP Transparency Seeks Answers on 1947 Roswell UFO Crash." The citation: Christopher Mellon, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, told the Roswell Daily Record, "Congress is clearly intent on getting to the bottom of all the rumors about the events that occurred in your town in July of 1947. He added, "The current DoD funding bill requires a review of all intelligence documents related to UAP going all the way back to 1945. It also requires any U.S. agencies with secrecy agreements related to UAP to identify those and provide copies to the new All-Domain Resolution Office, ARROW. Finally, Congress has established a whistleblower process that enables anyone with information about secret government UAP programs to share that information with ARROW despite any prior government secrecy agreements they may have signed. This is new, unprecedented, and amazing. Assuming Congress shares the results with the American people, we may finally know the truth in 12 to 18 months. Since that article was published on February 19th, 2023, that means 18 months after that date, it will be August 19th, 2024. By that time, we may indeed have much greater official clarity on UAP than we have had in the past 70 plus years. Now, I'm of the persuasion that there's just no way that Congress would learn about legacy UAP programs and not ultimately share that with the American public, especially after 70 plus years of lies and obfuscation. And if we do learn about legacy UFO programs that were and are highly funded in at least some of what they were and are working on, then to me this is without question an objective way to have greater clarity on the truth of how the U.S. government deals with UFO reality, even if this in and of itself isn't a smoking gun for the existence of some UFOs defying known technology while also being of unknown origin. But it is, in my view, an unambiguous step in that direction and would only support the narrative that there was and is an active UFO cover-up. Although it does look like that cover-up is unraveling as we speak. Here's an excerpt from a December article written by Chris Mellon, which gives credence to the idea that not only are we likely to hear about legacy UFO programs if Congress is apprised of them, but that we'll learn about them soon. He writes, in the case of UAP, however, the individuals coming forward want the information to be disclosed, as do many members of Congress who are the recipients of the information being gathered by AARO. In that regard, I recently had the opportunity to ask Senator Gillibrand, a leading sponsor of the legislation, whether she would support revealing the existence of alien technology if the whistleblower process confirms these sensational allegations. Without missing a beat, she replied, of course, why not? Most members of Congress and their staff, and most of those coming forward presenting evidence, seem to agree that the American people have a right to know. This is therefore a case where I believe the truth, whatever it proves to be, will prevail in the not-too-distant future. The UFO cover-up is pretty bizarre, if there's truth to it, which my analysis is that there is. You have to ask yourself, what would motivate the American government and what I believe is likely other governments to be so steadfast in a policy of keeping this under wraps that we're actually being engaged by non-human intelligence? And this is one of the big questions. And I will be honest, the idea of recovered material of exotic origin makes me uncomfortable on many levels, even intellectually, but also morally and spiritually. But it does appear that this is becoming a theme that is being threaded into the disclosure process. And honestly, this would make a lot of sense if it was true. Because if, just as an example, if the United States government came in possession of crashed UAP from another intelligence in the 40s, in the midst of the Cold War, knowing that the moment you're able to duplicate this technology, you will rule the world, that would be a huge impetus by any military and any intelligence agency to keep it as secret as humanly possible. Let's put this in other terms. You discover something that you realize that once it is understood, no other nation can compete with you strategically. Who in their right mind would not create the biggest secrecy possible behind that technology? And further, it's like, once you admit to this reality, once you admit that you're being engaged by non-human intelligence, now you really can't keep the potentiality of recovered exotic material under wraps like you could during the midst of a worldwide cover-up. Because now people, journalists, members of Congress, and which we're seeing now, and we're seeing that in real time, are going to start pursuing answers to that question. Were materials recovered via teams going out to places where UAP have crashed? We literally see this in the legislation right now. And the secret keepers, and I know that sounds ridiculous, but there are people behind the secrecy. The secret keepers knew, obviously, that the moment you have anything resembling disclosure, that's exactly what's going to happen. And we are now starting to see a process unfold where transparency is starting to increase. And what else do you see within that framework? You see Congress drafting legislation to learn if there are legacy UFO programs that are tasked to exploit this kind of technology. So in this light, you can kind of see why the American government and other governments may see this as an all or nothing proposition. Now, what's interesting is it appears, if there's truth to recovered material, that the cover-up is threaded through corporate interest. That corporate interest is part of why this has been kept so secret for so long. And it's not exclusively, people in government, in the intelligence community, that don't want to rock the boat, if you will, by putting new information into the zeitgeist and not knowing how that's going to impact civilization. Here's a clip from a show that Tucker was doing. He was interviewing scientist Gary Nolan, and Gary Nolan goes into that connection that may be there between aerospace companies and policies of secrecy.
The other point is, I think that's important to realize, is that when a lot of, let's say, these events were occurring and there's claimed crash materials that might have been collected, this went off to places like Lockheed and all of the big aerospace companies. They wanted to profit off of it. And many of them basically took a lot of the information, set it aside, and they decided, okay, well, we're going to profit off it. We're not going to tell Congress what this is all about, because if we do, then maybe we have to share this with McDonnell Douglas or something.
How could it? So later, after that clip, Tucker asks Gary, well, how would they profit off it? And Gary explains, first of all, black budget money to try to understand the technology, and that could be a flow of money that they could get, who knows how regularly, that would give them profits. And further, these corporations would hope that someday they'd be able to understand it and then profit off of it in a huge way once they do understand it. Now, there's a lot of mythology within ufology that they have understood it and they have back engineered it. In my opinion, there's not really a lot of good evidence for that, and I think that's more mythology than reality. And Gary Nolan went on to say that he thinks we're like hundreds of technology revolutions away from being able to duplicate this technology. And I've heard George Knapp say, if you were a corporation and you had this technology, would you want to give it up? Would you want to share it with the world? Would you want to broaden restraints on what you can and cannot do with it, and be forced to have it looked at by other people, other interests? He said something to that effect, and then he said, I wouldn't if I owned the corporation. And I feel the same way. I'm just going to be honest. If I own a huge corporation and I have recovered alien craft, if my whole shtick is the benefit of my corporation and its interests, then I don't want anyone to see it or to know that it exists. If anything, I'd want to keep the amount of people that know that we have possession of this and we're being funded to look at it. I would want to keep that number as small as possible. On March 11th, Liberation Times published an article titled "Lockheed Martin Challenged on UFO Legacy Programs as Politicians Talk Hearings." And here is an excerpt. Journalist and filmmaker Jeremy Corbell has challenged the U.S. Senate Committee on Appropriations to audit alleged unidentified anomalous phenomena UAP special access programs, citing Lockheed Martin as an example. While appearing on Newsmax yesterday alongside Representative Tim Burchett, who was also a UAP transparency advocate, Corbell referenced the committee's chair, Patty Murray, and its vice chair, Susan Collins, in his challenge. Quote, "I would like to also encourage you, Congressman Tim Burchett, with whatever power that you do have with your colleagues, to do one thing in particular. Right now, we have the U.S. Senate Committee on Appropriations. They have jurisdiction over the spending. We have Senator Patty Murray. We have Senator Susan Collins, who are able to audit the special access programs, such as ones that are held like you're talking about at Lockheed Martin." Corbell also named Lieutenant General Dimitri Henry, Director of Intelligence from the U.S. Joint Staff, as key to transparency efforts. Quote, "So I'd like to include in this investigation, which I ask of you, for example, Lieutenant General Dimitri Henry, you know he is the current Director for Intelligence Joint Staff J2. They have authority and management over the intelligence community, and they should be asking questions if we do have UFO exploitation programs. What I'm calling the silver bullet, they should be able to ask of Lockheed and other contractors, what are they working on?" And here is Lou Elizondo adding to this theme. Lou Elizondo, former director of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, backed up Corbell's comments, telling Liberation Times, "I applaud the effort to get to the bottom of any legacy efforts to exploit UAP materials and have stated in the past my position on the matter. Quote, I would also go a step further and not limit the focus of the inquiry to just one aerospace company, but to several others that have likely played a key historical role in this endeavor." On March 18th, in the Politico publication, an article titled what the Biden administration isn't telling Congress about spy balloons, it is relayed the following. Lawmakers are actively pushing for more information from the administration. The Senate plans to hold a public hearing on the topic in April. While this may involve spy balloons, my understanding is it will inevitably involve UAP as well. And to gain greater insight on the nature of this public hearing that's slated to happen this coming April, here's a clip from Project Unity's YouTube channel where he interviewed Representative Tim Burchett on March 18th.
I went to Comer and I said, I'd like to have a hearing on this. And he said, you have to get approval for the speaker. I went and saw McCarthy and he gave me his word. We're going to have a hearing. So we're going to ask some tough questions. We're going to have the top people in the world there and it's going to be good. And we'll make sure I'll let you know.
I'd love to know who those top people in the world will be and what the nature of these tough questions will be. I'm assuming he's referencing the hearing this April. However, I've heard that there are going to be several hearings on UAP in the year 2023. If so, that's really going to help us gain clarity on what the U.S. government knows about UAP and how they deal with it, because those in the know will be asked questions about that. I've heard some people say that they think that in this upcoming public hearing in April, that Lou Elizondo is going to be one of the people questioned during that hearing. I don't know if that's true or not, but that would obviously be quite epic. On March 22nd, 2023, the YouTube channel Disclosure team interviewed Tyler Henry, medium Tyler Henry, and scientist Gary Nolan. It was a really great episode. A link will be in the description below. But Gary Nolan was asked about any updates on future hearings, and he had some rather interesting things to say. I'll play the clip and then we'll analyze some of it.
And recently we've heard inklings of potential new public hearings, and I just wondered if there was anything you could, tell us about that. Have you heard anything behind the scenes?
Well, I mean, behind the scenes, yes. But I mean, I don't even have to go behind the scenes. I mean, it's public information now that several of the Congress people have talked openly about, literally going to the Speaker of the House, McCarthy, and asking for these open hearings. Yeah. We all know that some of the whistleblowers have stepped forward and done all of this, and talked about this. And I mean, I have a letter signed by 12 senators saying, we're doing this. Right. I mean, I know as well behind the scenes of some of the heads of the intelligence agencies and DOD who've literally said, I won't repeat it because I've been asked not to, but some astounding conclusions. Oh my God, Ali, I will call you. I promise. He's a very good colleague. Has a fantastic, basically, cure for some cancers. So
you can pick up the phone. It's okay.
No, it's okay. We've known each other for 40 years. He can wait. So I think people just need to look 3 months ago as to how far it's come, and just take heart in the knowledge that there's a lot of people who have crossed over that threshold of wanting to move it forward.
It was rather interesting when Gary said that heads of intelligence agencies and DOD literally said they've come to some astounding conclusions, but he could not repeat what those conclusions were because he was told not to. So this is open to interpretation. Is it that these heads of intelligence agencies and DOD were finally read into some of the UFO programs that are been around for a long time, and as a result, their conclusion about the nature of reality has shifted? I really don't know. That's something that maybe Gary Nolan can share at some point, but I found that really interesting, and everything points to future public hearings, not the least of which is a future public hearing that's going to happen this April. And I want to remind you of a quote that I shared earlier in this video from Chris Mellon, which is, and I quote, "Assuming Congress shares the results with the American people, we may finally know the truth in 12 to 18 months. So my argument, and I'm glad I wrote the article that I did so that it's set in stone exactly my perspective on this disclosure process, right? Don't argue with me, argue with my article. It's all there for people to see. My argument is that there is that the UFO narrative on some level is falsifiable. It just is. And some people get really irritated when I say that. It just is. Are there legacy UFO programs that were highly funded, that were studying UAP, maybe exploitation programs, because it's true that UAP have crashed and been recovered? You can argue that it's all a big mind virus, and aerospace companies like Lockheed Martin actually discovered something that wasn't a UAP, but they all talked themselves into believing it was a UAP. Okay, if you want to make that argument, go ahead and make that argument. Let's see how persuasive it is to the public. But the bottom line is, if we discover that there are UAP programs that go back decades, were funded tons of money, and the claim is that they recovered UAP, well, I'm sorry, at that point it's very plausible that that's the truth, if that's what's being revealed by the United States Congress. If the skeptics start making it a conspiracy theory to believe what the U.S. government conveys to the public, well, then now the skeptics have become the conspiracy theorists, and the UFO believers are the ones that are taking what the government says at face value. And wouldn't that be a funny little irony? Now, I bring this up because it's true. It's true that if at some point through open hearings and congressional statements that they say that these legacy programs exist, it's true that that's not epistemologically scientific proof. On the other hand, when it comes to how society runs, right, and government public relationship, generally we believe our governments, and we don't assume in a knee-jerk way that they're lying to us, especially when that lie would put the U.S. government in a really poor light. There's nothing positive about learning that your government has been lying to you about UAP for decades, and that, oh, by the way, the close of Project Blue Book, we kept studying it. We've spent hundreds of millions, billions of dollars studying it. Why? Because, well, it's real. If the government says that at some point in an official capacity, it doesn't make them look good. It makes them look bad. Which, okay, maybe they want to make themselves look bad. My point is that if it comes to that, there's a lot of reason to think or to interpret that there's truth to those statements. Not that, oh, we believe the government for 70 plus years that they're not interested in UFOs because there's nothing to them. We believe them because that's what a good skeptic does, right? Now, if they change their tune radically, do we suddenly not believe them? I don't know. That seems like a double standard that's glaring to me. But let's see how this all pans out. It's going to be really interesting. I think 2023 is going to be really interesting. And you know what? Maybe I'll be completely wrong about the UFO narrative. Maybe it is all misidentifications. It always has been misidentifications. Maybe there are no legacy UFO programs, because why would there be legacy UFO programs if it's all misidentifications? Maybe all that rhetoric about aerospace companies being funded by the U.S. government to study UFOs, maybe that was all just mythology. And if that's the case, I think we will discover that within the next year or two, because of the UFO legislation that is forcing the answers. And I'm okay with that. I am totally okay if I end up being wrong. But I cover this issue because I think it's really important. And because I assess that I'm right. And I believe this topic, in some respects, is the biggest topic on the face of the earth. What's bigger than the realization that we're being engaged by non-human intelligence and that governments have been lying about it and have forensic proof that this presence is here? What's bigger than that? I'm not saying there aren't bigger stuff than that, but I'm saying there's arguments as to why this would be the biggest topic in the world. Please do not forget to subscribe. And if you'd like to support this channel, you can check out my merch shop where I sell t-shirts. You can become a patron. You can become a YouTube member. You can give me a one-time donation. All those potentialities are in the description box below. Or you could just slap a like on this bad boy and I'll appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for watching. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. If you're still here, I want you to put the word leaf in the comments below so that I know that you got to this point and I can feel all warm and fuzzy inside. See you next episode. Special thanks to all patrons, YouTube members, those that have bought merch, those that have given me a one-time donation. I couldn't do without you. Thank you so much. See you in the next episode.